Hey there, and welcome to the third episode of Radically Curious, a show that focuses on extraordinary human beings, their experiences, achievements, and things to learn from them to live a better life. Today we're chatting with Vijay Daita. Unlike other guests of my show, he's not well known yet, and I truly believe the yet part is temporary. Vijay is a 13-year-old, started coding when he was 7 years old, and now is a Google certified Android developer. He's a co-founder of a charitable organization that teaches kids how to code. He won and participated in multiple hackathons and app challenges throughout his career. He's an extraordinary high schooler and the most intelligent 13-year-old person I've ever met. I'm sure you'll hear more about him in the future, and he will be known for many exciting things. We all need to support such bright minds, especially during their school years and the beginnings of their professional journeys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the most interesting parts of the conversation. Thank you and enjoy. So let's start with you explaining your journey to becoming a person, or let's say staying the person that is infinitely curious, because kids by nature are super curious. They absorb information, they bump into things, and as we become older and as we age, we lose that ability. And let's say various systems in place limit our ability to stay curious. So tell us when it all started, like how it started for you.
So when I was 8, my dad introduced me to programming with code instead of block programming. Previous to that, I had used Kodu and Scratch and this other less known application called Alice. It's gaining popularity now, but I didn't really take to those as easily. I always found them to be quite limited. But when I got introduced to JavaScript, I thought that it was it was much more extensible, but I didn't really understand how programming worked then. It just was more like I translate the things that I did in block programming to real code, and it's able to do more than what the block coding did. I thought that that was a pretty cool feature of real code, so I started looking into it more, and I think after looking into different sort of aspects for different applications that I was interested in making, I was able to get to a point where I kind of knew what I was doing, but not really. And then I went back and did more things relating to how the behind the scenes of it works. And now I feel more comfortable coding.
Before the coding, because you mentioned that you got introduced into actual coding when you were 8 years old, I checked out that you've been developing Android apps since 8 years old, which is fascinating. But like, did you get introduced to the code programming even before 8 years old?
First of all, I was 8 turning 9 when I released my first app. So it was like 1 week before my birthday when I released the first app. So
Technically 9, right?
It was for all practical reasons, I was 9. I was 8 when I think I really got introduced and I understood it. I started off with JavaScript, but the JavaScript I was running was mainly looking at the code and then running it blindly without actually editing it. That was when I was, I don't know, maybe 7 3/4 or after 7.5. But when I really started writing my own code that would do its own thing, that was when I was 8.
Makes sense. And what was your journey before that? Like, did you read a lot of books, or what was your interaction with knowledge and information in a way?
Well, I think most of what I got, most of my input were shows on YouTube and shows that my dad put on, and both of them revolved around the idea of science. I thought that science was a cool topic because unlike something similar to history where things are very fluid and you have one account telling one thing and another account telling another thing, and it varies from country to country and person to person, science is something that is relatively uniform across the sources that you get it from. So I think it was less confusing than history on that part. but the shows that I watched still had that storytelling element to it that made it attractive to me.
From what it sounds like, when I first opened your website, and I didn't even know that you're 13 years old. Just for the context, you joined Corona Y sometime in March, right, from the early days. And
Hmm.
the nature of Corona Y is that we don't really know who people are. The degrees don't matter, age doesn't matter, and we only see LinkedIn or websites. And when I first opened it, I remember seeing like Google certified Android developers, something else. And to me, the pattern was, oh, this guy is a developer and he's probably like, I don't know, 20 something or like 30 something. And then when I started interacting with you on the calls, I realized that you are actually younger. And then I will always remember that moment when you messaged me about the spectrometry and some machine learning models. And I'm like, I should probably ask him how old he is. And when I asked you, like, just curious, how old are you? And you replied 13, I was like, wow. Because for me, 13 represented me literally like, doing meaningless stuff and just like exploring the world, but through just like physical objects and like, yeah, maybe learning some things in school, but not being very interested about these. And that's when I first understood that there is something about you that I should be curious about as equally as you are about coronavirus. So it's just fascinating to see because you're not the only high schooler in Corona Y, and that is obviously a pattern. And that is something that I always knew that kids are predispositioned to be more capable of absorbing knowledge and actually, producing things at scale. And your experience and just like observing you interacting in Corona Y, like kind of being everywhere, being, able to synthesize knowledge, ask very meaningful questions on the topics of like natural language processing, or you jumping in and giving advice with the actual Python code, that was like wow for me. But yeah, so I'm curious how you mentioned that your dad was the major influence of your curiosity by putting on shows, and uh, do you think he was doing it like to kind of put you in an ideal environment while seeing your unique skills?
I don't think I was extraordinarily good when I was a child. I think that my dad and my mom both collectively reared me to do things in a certain way that would lead me to want to be more curious and inquisitive. My mom focused a lot when I was little on like math, like my times tables and addition and things like that. Whereas I think my dad really sold the whole dream of how everything that I'm learning right now in math is going to lead to something big. I didn't really watch Superman when I was little. My version of Superman when I was little was the idea of Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg because they're very rich.
Mm.
Um, and with that sort of quantifiable thing where look at how much money you have now, which is nothing. Look at how much money I have because I took all of these steps, starting with doing my times table as well, which is considerably more than I had. And look at how much this guy who did his times tables really well, which if computer science is an extension of math, that is true to some extent. Look at how successful he is doing all of this stuff and then like eradicating polio and solving malaria and doing all these sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And through that, he really sold me. And he really sold me on that. Another thing that I think I would attribute to me being curious would be my experience getting into contest math. So I'm not I'm not by any standard really good at it. I'm still trying to get good at it, but my friends when I was in middle school had already started contest math and they were doing it well. And so when they introduced me to it, I wanted to become better than them at it.
By the way, what's
So
contest
I,
now?
so contest math is have you heard of the AMC?
The actual competition, right?
Yeah, the competition AMC or math counts.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, there are competitions where a bunch of students solve math problems of various kinds, and whoever gets the most right, or most right and most blank according to what sort of point system they're using, if you hit a certain threshold for the AMC, you're able to go to an invitational exam. And if you do well in math counts, you get to go to a state and a national championship. So one of my friends actually made it to the national championship, which is pretty cool. But I really wanted to compete with them in the sense that I wanted to know more and I wanted to know enough that by the next time I tried out for the team, which was in eighth grade, I'd be able to make it on and I'd be able to perform well and I wouldn't be someone that dragged down the team. There weren't that many people interested in it at my school.
So it basically the competition was something that you know put more emphasis on the importance of this for you, besides the just just being curious, right?
It's more fun when you do it with a bunch of people. Like we'd stay So after our math, we used to do online courses for math because we all had tested out of this one class and we could go to another class. We did it online and then we just practiced together and we'd have get-togethers where we'd practice and then we'd have club meetings where we'd practice. And I think that was a really fun experience because before everything would be me solo, but now I was in more of a group. And I think that also led to something, wanting to find groups of like-minded people, such as CoronaWide too, where I could hone my skills and I could also talk to other people that were interested in the same things that I was interested
And you've been a part of many competitions like that congressional app challenge or something. How many of those have you been participating, and what's your experience with that?
in. The Congressional App Challenge was my first non-Kaggle competition. So I tried to do a few Kaggle competitions, like the NBA prediction one for March Madness, but I didn't perform very well in those, and I mostly forked notebooks and made edits to those notebooks wherever I saw fit. And I also tried to do a couple ensemble models, but I think once I got into Congressional App Challenge, this was where I was able to create something entirely of my own that I could submit and get feedback on. Uh, One of the people that was in my contest math team with me, hit one of the kids that goes to his school actually won the competition, which is super interesting.
And it seems that you're not just taking competitions that are related to AI and machine learning, but all kinds of other competitions like spelling and other things, right?
Oh, yeah, I did the spelling bee last year, but I didn't. I I mostly did the spelling bee because uh, in my class spelling bee, someone had predicted that I was going to be the runner-up in the school spelling bee, and I really wanted to avoid that, but I ended up being the runner-up in the school spelling bee. So competition really has to do a lot with where I put my time. If I feel like there's going to be a prize and it's going to be a big prize, not only in like stature for things such as college applications, but in terms of social standing in my friend group, I would really try to hone in on it and do well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of friends, I'm sure that your friends are, equally curious about the world, right? Like, is that a thing? Like, do you gravitate towards people like you?
Well, most of my friends are not programmers, and I have like two different circles that I talk to most of the time. The core circle that I talk to are they're pretty curious. They do a lot of the same things that I do, um, and they like to have conversations about a lot of different and interesting things. But then I also have another outer friend group that I talk to on a less regular basis. I'm still friends with them, and they're like pretty much every other kid.
because it's important to have diversity of thoughts, and interesting people are not the ones that are not just the ones that are machine learning engineers, and there are different professions, different angles and directions, even in beyond going into science. Like you're obviously doing music, right? And I I was personally involved in a band back in the days, and I played guitar, and I was composing music, and I do attribute a lot of my, let's call it, neurodiversity or neuroplasticity to the actual experience of writing music, of experiencing music, writing complex music, and even managing a band. So all of these things throughout our life are basically adding up and expanding our horizon of things that we're thinking about.
I agree with that a lot. For me, music has been, I have a sort of love-hate relationship with music, to be honest, because I have these times where I'm playing in groups and I have times when I'm playing alone where I really enjoy it. But there are other times where either if it's like an audition that I've been practicing a really long time for, and it's like the last week and I have to make sure that I get that down because I gotta make the audition. Uh, it kind of feels like a chore, but then you go into the group that you just got into and it becomes more enjoyable again. It's a weird cycle, but I don't think I would be who I am right now without music.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you start playing music?
I started playing the piano when I was like 5 or 6, and I started playing the violin when I was 7 or 8. I haven't played the violin for like 4 years now, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes all things feel like a chore sometimes when you have to like push the boundary and get to the next stage and kind of get to the environment where you can actually enjoy it. Be it leveling up your skills so you can participate in Kaggle competition, or learning new language or things like that so you can speak to other people. Yeah, I can totally.
Kaggle competitions were fun, but the thing we, the thing is that I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't have my skill set when I was starting off with Kaggle is nowhere near what I have now, and it's nowhere near what I actually need to perform well. I haven't ranked in any of them, but I think what the thing that makes Kaggle competitions and competitions like USACO, the USA Computing Olympiad, unique is that instead of you looking at the application of how this model can be used, it really requires you to take a look at the model and understand how it works and understand in what ways you can modify or create a new kind of model so that it performs better. Because I feel like if you understand how to do the front end and back end and web app and normal application development, creating a real app is easy enough. But if but it takes a lot more time to really understand what you're doing.
Especially if you consider that most of the machine learning algorithms are kind of black boxy, and there are a lot of things that we still don't understand how the model performs. That adds an extra challenge to it. What's your experience with that? Because obviously you jumped straight into Kaggle and machine learning models, and obviously you have your unique view of the ecosystem of machine learning, and I would be interested to hear what do you think is the, like, I don't know, the challenges or like the limitations, especially for a person that is quite new to the industry.
Um, I don't think the limitations are with the platform itself. The limitations are with how easy they make it to really understand how things work and how to build your own model. Because whenever you get started, they try to make it very flashy, like create a model in 5 lines of code, have your own image classifier in 5 lines of code, import Keras, load the ResMed 50 model, train it on some data that you didn't even pre-process, and then and then predict. And look, it works. It but this is different than other kinds of programming or other kinds of math, because it doesn't start at the very basics. It always starts at really, always starts at the end part. They don't try to make the basics exciting for you. They try to make the end goal exciting. They try to make the end goal really exciting and really catchy, which gets you in and you'll be able to apply a model. But if you try to dig deeper, it gets more and more complicated. You see more and more math functions that, even though you might understand it, the notation just looks confusing. And I think that's a problem, but it's being solved pretty well as time goes on.
Because you deal with abstractions, not the actual underlying math. And not sure if you're familiar with like the actual math behind gradient descent, um, or like do you work with the abstractions that Keras and TensorFlow and others provide?
I work with the abstraction mostly, but I'm trying to learn more of how the math itself works.
Yeah, because that's a real challenge because everyone is trying to make tools and infrastructure to make it as easy as possible to jump in. But there is definitely a challenge because once you jump in, have something that is kind of working, you then have to fine tune it. And that's where you hit the limitations of understanding like how the actual black box works, what's the actual math function, like what's a sigmoid, what are different kind of functions and thresholds that you're dealing with, like what backpropagation means in terms of math and all of these complex things that sometimes are super overwhelming. But yeah, I agree. Like the best thing that happened for machine learning community is the extreme level of the speed with which the abstractions are being created that enable people like you to just jump in, throw a data set of YouTube videos and predict some cats and dogs on that type of data. Yeah, it's exciting. Um, Another question that I had, because I tried to understand, like, what was I actually doing when I was 13 years old? And I know that I replied to you that I was playing with dirt, but partially I was also, doing some other things like playing games, for example. And that's what typically kids do when they're young because they're exposed to
What sort of games?
I played a lot of multiplayer RPGs like the Lineage, which is similar to World of Warcraft. And for me, the experience was I I got um, I got obsessed in a way of understanding how it all works to game the system and just like understand how to make it work in my benefit. And I was like automating bots and like basically running crews of players to generate more of the in-game currency, and then I was even selling that to the people for real money. And that was I guess my first actual like business experience. But then it got really boring to me because I almost tried every single thing and I explored every single I would say journey. And even though I haven't reached the 80 level or something of the game, I almost knew like what things will I experience when I will be the level 80 or so. So it became very boring to me in a way, and I just stopped playing. And I think I stopped playing in school, and only for a couple of times when I was in university, I was coming back to games, but more from a social perspective, because it was really about the hanging out with my friends that I wouldn't normally hang out, and we would play the what's it called, the tower defense game based on Warcraft, Dota, the first version of Dota, and it was fun. But also, you reach a certain limit when you start questioning whether you should be spending more time on games or something more meaningful. So my question to you: what's your experience with games, and like, tell me more about it.
So, with board games or with video games, or do you want both?
Just any games.
So, if you call a sport a game, I started off with tennis, and it's kind of something that's always been in the backdrop because I really find it as a way for me to get all of my anger out, and in the mornings for me to really get pumped for the day.
Yeah.
I see it as more of a tool, but ever since I've been on the tennis team for my middle school and the junior varsity team for my high school, I've seen it more as as a competition too, and I really want to start getting better at it. And another thing with my relationship with sports is that there was this time when I was like 10 when I was really fat. And so I was really, I always felt pretty clouded in the way I moved and the way I thought and stuff like that. And so I think as I have gotten more healthy and as I have grown taller and lost weight, uh, I think sports have become an avenue for me to really enjoy it instead of having it become a chore. Like you have to go outside for a certain amount of day. It really, I really see the relationship between that and how I feel for the rest of my work. There's a difference in the days that I play tennis and the days that I don't for like the rest of my work, how productive I am, etc. So that's my relationship with sports. I also swim. Swimming is just for fun, and I don't really swim anymore because of security concerns. But I stopped swimming like last year or 2 years ago because my dad was pretty concerned about the safety of pools. With board games and video games, I started playing board games when I was like 6. Uh, the first board game I think I played was either Othello or Mastermind. Othello is the game where you try to put circles surrounding a set of circles of a different color so that you can own that set of circles. And Mastermind is a game where you try to predict what another person has
Mm.
on, and it's like it's like a combination between 4 colors. So those were two games that I found fun. Then I got into Monopoly. I like to play Monopoly with my family a lot, but I don't play it much with my friends because Monopoly you can get like your dinner and you can get your cousins and you can just sit and play a game that's simple in concept but can take you down lows and highs
Yeah.
and a single person can become really like big in that, and that just sets the grudge for days.
Yeah, you lose
But
friends when you play Monopoly.
yeah, then I played in 6th grade. I played chess with one of my friends on the bus, and it was fun, but I don't think I just played chess without really thinking about what I was doing. What I understood how the pieces moved and all of that, but I didn't really understand the longer term strategy so that I would be able to win games. I only won one game, and then this was on the bus, so she won like the 180 other games in the school year. So, and I got a draw once, and I was very happy with that. So after, so I guess video games also came in around 5th and 6th grade, but the video games then weren't as sophisticated as the RPG games you mentioned. They were like Slitherio and Agario, so they were much more accessible on like school Chromebooks, but they were also way more boring. And so I moved on from games like that to not playing games for a period of while and then going on to games like Fortnite. And the thing with Fortnite is that you can win a game, but they try to make sure that it's a right balance of easiness so that you can win or get close to a win. But after a while of playing Fortnite, unless it's like something with friends where you actually enjoy it because it's with friends and you're able to talk with them about all sorts of random things, it if you play it like solo, for me personally, you just after a while you're like, what am I doing with my time? It it doesn't it kind of makes me feel guilty after playing it if I don't have any
Yeah.
sort of reason. So I usually play exclusively with friends and family uh on Fortnite.
But how do you manage that feeling? Because obviously games are designed to be played, right? And it's so easy to just jump in and spend 12 hours playing the game and then be like, oh wow, like the day has passed by. And I'm guilty when I was kid. just like jumping in, working, playing for 6 hours, and then my parents would come home and they will be like, "Have you eaten anything?" And I'm like, "No, I was just playing and I forgot." And it's tricky because you kind of channel your consciousness into this virtual world where
I wonder matches in the games that you played. Like, were they did they have like matches?
no, it was well, the tower defense that definitely has matches in it, which is like 30 or 40-minute games. But I'm more referring to those endless games, the MMO RPGs, like the World of Warcraft, the ones where there is no end and you can limitlessly just play and play and play.
I've never played those sort of games.
Do not. But how do you motivate yourself to just like stop playing? Because that is definitely enjoyable experience, right? To do something that feels more like a chore, be it violin or sports or other things. What drives you?
If I've if I usually use games to get my mind off of something. Say I'm having a trouble with a problem that I'm doing, or if I'm having trouble with a section, or if I'm having trouble with programming or something like that. If I get really sick of it after a point, or if I just can't solve it, I'll hop on for and play a match. And the good thing about Fortnite as a game specifically is that they have about 20 to 30-minute matches. It can go up to like an hour depending on what sort of scenario you are in. An hour is an extreme limit, but it it like you can say one match and I'll hop off, and
Yeah,
you can be pretty confident that it'll be for a period of time. And they've been trying to get people to like get back in by making the get back into a new game easier. But the problem is that it takes time for them to create matches. So while it creates matches, you really get time to contemplate on what you should really be doing.
that's great. And yeah, a lot of things in our life, and I'm sure you've experienced, are designed to have us kind of spend more time in it, be it Facebook or other platforms. And there is definitely
My
this.
Facebook first.
I'm sorry, what?
It's TikTok for us.
Oh yeah. So yeah, like tell me your experience with TikTok, like that endless feed of enjoyable things, because it's definitely addictive in a way, right?
I just turn off my phone for most of the day. I can't because if I've tried with some periods of time where I have it like next to me, and it doesn't really serve a purpose. I can get all of my notifications on my computer with my new Mac, but if I turn it off, I find that I can be much more focused, and it if it takes effort for you to be able to do something, then you're less likely to do it. I think that's like pretty standard. But and so I try to make watching these sort of stuff as hard as possible for me.
Yeah, friction.
When I'm like thinking, I have these periods of time where I'm thinking deeply about what I need to be doing, what I should be doing, and I have these other periods of time where I can be mindless, I can be reckless, and like overall crazy. And so I can really plan ahead using
Yeah, makes sense.
that time.
I also have those moments when after, like, as you can imagine in Corona Y, I have very, very full days of things happening. And then at the end of the day, I just need to watch something stupid, just like so
But yeah,
like meaningless that like to just detox from all the complexity and
that's
time.
facts.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's definitely fascinating from the perspective that you are creating these processes or like environments to make it harder for you to do things that are, let's call it, things that make you waste time in a way. And it's also sometimes it's helpful, right? Sometimes you
It
get some
is.
new perspectives.
I mean, and especially with apps like now they've been flooding feeds with a lot more interesting information. So instead of it just being dance videos, it's more like they talk about current issues, and creators talk about politics and science and religion and all that sort of stuff that really expands someone's viewpoint beyond their own community. There are quite a lot of members of different communities that I don't really talk to, or that are left out at my school because they're not part of the community itself that I'm in. But by having this sort of platform that I get my feeds from, I can understand more perspectives,
Yeah.
and it's more democratized and it's more variant than the news is.
Yeah. What's your so that's TikTok, right? That's your experience
Uh-huh.
with TikTok. What which platforms would you recommend besides TikTok for people that want to expand their horizons and get out of the bubble?
First of all, TikTok, it really depends on what video. I'll stay on that for a few seconds before I move on to something else. But TikTok, you have to make sure that you watch and like the videos that expand your horizons, in your opinion. And you have to make sure that they're all very different so that they can customize the feed to show mostly that sort of content. You'll get some dumb stuff in the middle, but that really
That's the
helps.
nature of
Otherwise,
our world.
if you only pick the ones that you either agree with, uh or if you just scroll past them quickly, the algorithm won't pick up on that.
Yeah.
So that's an important note for TikTok. But for something like, the only other social media platform I have is Snapchat, and I just use that to communicate with people whose phone number I don't have.
And it sounds like you're already kind of adjusting to the nature of algorithms, right? And I've been adjusting to it since the very, very beginning of Facebook when they start introducing the algorithmic timeline, when you would have to make sure that you like certain things for you to see certain things. And then it got all crazy because now I only see things that I already like. And it's impossible for me to get out of that bubble. On YouTube, it's actually a little bit different because on YouTube, it's I'm worried about liking or watching something so different because I don't want to ruin my customized preferences towards.
I have a set list of channels that I like, that I watch, and since, I don't know, for the past 2 or 3 years, ever since like controversies started to get into the news about YouTube, I haven't really subscribed to I haven't subscribed to many creators, and I also haven't liked many videos or commented. So with that, it's harder for it to be able to guess. But I mostly from my friends and also from my previous recommendations, I'll have a small short list of channels that I watch. So I think that's how I personally counter that issue. And especially since they're less of the subjective kind of videos that I like to watch on YouTube. They're not about politics or religion or any of that stuff. I think I still get a pretty balanced intake of information.
Yeah, and
So it depends on what each platform for.
yeah, each platform is different, and there's obviously with all of these controversies right now with the let's call it objectivity of knowledge and objectivity of truth, because people are arguing whether it's possible for Facebook to actually show truth, because in the nature of information, it's not, because it's so subjective, and there is no way for us to kind of claim that this is the way that Facebook should be showing certain information, because people have different opinions, people have different preferences, and yeah.
I don't think Facebook ever will, or social media will be able to definitively say that something is truthful and something is not. They'll just have to identify what sort of content or what sort of thing it's talking about and provide context under that post. That's not something that's optional. You have to go through that content to get to the next portion, so that you can't choose to put yourself into a bubble.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And talking about like content and people, and like what are the key people that inspire you? And basically the people that you follow in terms of the content, or be it YouTube or creators or personas, just interesting people.
I'll give it, let me think about it for a few seconds. Well, I'm going to start off with my parents, first of all, mostly
Okay.
because of how influenced I am by them. Uh, Next, go to my, I'd go to my uncle because he's a very like loud and articulate person where he can really excite you about something that you're good at. Uh, my dad is very toned down and he's very relaxed and collected, but my uncle can really get excited about even some of the most random things that I say. And I think having a balance between those sort of two things can lead you to not go down rabbit holes that end up in nothing, but still allow you to explore the things that could lead to something good. Um,
That makes
that's
sense.
and So I have like these people at different levels that encourage me and calm me down in different ways that helped me stay focused in what I want to do and where I want to go. As far as influencers or YouTube channels that I currently watch, I like Company Man and Business Casual. The ones that talk about businesses the because behind every like business success story, there's always those uh, trying moments that come before them. There's always those issues that come before that. There are also incredible maneuvers that are made by executives and owners that can allow teams and allow companies to stay afloat after an especially hard time.
That makes sense. And speaking of that, and this conversation has been fascinating, and I'm sure it will be super interesting for people to watch and listen to. And to wrap this up, just to understand, where do you want to go? Like, what drives you in the perspective of 10, 20 years from now? Let's call it 50 years from now. What do you want to do in this fascinating curious world?
I don't think that far most of the time. I have general goals, and the longest they go for is 5 years. Because 5 years ago I was 8 and I was getting started in programming. So I had the idea that by 13, by the time I was able to legally do a bunch of stuff online, right, I would uh, I thought that I'd be able to start an internet business and become like successful, have my own internet business that was able to do that had some sort of influence over the world, and it would be headed by me, and I'd have like the the special business card that I could show people.
Nice.
Um, but that that doesn't really pan out because I didn't have a concrete plan about how I was going to get there. Because you can always say, if I have my $1 million, I'll be able to invest it in like, I don't know, a million ways. But the the path to that was, I didn't really think through the path of that
Yeah.
when I was 8, because uh I thought that you could rack up money like you could rack up points in the system. Like you just had to do one thing to get like a bunch of points. But it's harder than that. It's way harder than that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a gig, or it's hard to create an app and get people to buy it with money that they could be using somewhere else. And then it's hard to get those people to stay as customers and for them not to just scam you out of your money and time. I didn't really think through any of that. So my revised plan is basically to try to get as do as many like little jobs and little things as possible, and join as many projects as possible, so that I can meet as many people as possible and uh, do each of them to the best I can, so that either they become successful themselves, or I'm able to work with the people, or I could work with people from that team, so we could start something else later and become successful while keeping up with other stuff. I'm pretty confident it doesn't work like that, but I want to fail as many times before I graduate high school.
Nice. That's beautiful goal. I definitely resonate with that. I had my share of failures in my life, and I definitely attribute, success to the failures and ability to learn from those. So I definitely, I can confirm that's the way to go. That's the only way to go. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Like it was fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice day.